It was morning when Charlie woke up. He knew this because he hadn't closed his curtains and, during the summer, at about 7:30 in the morning the sun reached a point in the sky where it came through the gaps in the other houses around his home and lanced straight into his eyes. It was a more than efficient alarm clock, especially when he felt like he had a hangover. In fact, the hangover feeling seemed so real that the previous day was dreamlike, and he couldn't help wondering if it had all been a weird hallucination after some bad beer or something. What also didn't help was the fact that he had spent all night dreaming about cats. Big cats, small cats, kittens. It was as if he couldn't escape them. When he slowly pushed himself into a kneeling position, he was hoping that, when he looked down, his arm would be bare. Unfortunately, the tattoo was very much still there with its odd-looking feline. He had been drugged and tattooed in the magic shop. It had really happened, and he wasn't sure he wanted to deal with it. Climbing off the bed, he headed for the bathroom. It was possible the tattoo was painted on, and it would come off with water. Then he would be able to forget the whole thing. He padded into the bathroom and avoided looking at himself in the mirror, going straight for his toothbrush. Why anyone would want to kidnap him was beyond him. He was basically boring. Even his last girlfriend had said the only thing remotely striking about him was his eyes. Of course, she had been breaking up with him at the time. Shaking his head, he wandered over to the shower to turn it on as he brushed his teeth. He was sure things would make more sense once he was clean and alert. The buzzing of the sonic brush did not help his headache, so he tried to think about anything else as he endured the discomfort. That was why he noticed that something was tickling the back of his leg. Absently, he flicked his hand behind him to remove whatever it was, and the funniest sensation ran up his spine. However, the tickling stopped, so he went back to trying to ignore the ache behind his eyes. A few seconds later, when he walked back to the sink, the tickling was back. He spat while shifting his leg, then rinsed his mouth before swiping at whatever it was again. This time he felt something furry, and he turned rapidly, because their last dog had died the previous year and his mum hadn't come to terms with the idea of a new one yet. Thankfully, there was not a zombie dog looking for a scratch behind the ear, but he did see something move out of the corner of his eye. Twisting rather than turning, he followed the movement and had to blink at what he saw. There, behind him, twitching in agitation, was a fluffy brown and white tail, only he couldn't tell what it belonged to. He moved a little more, and the tail moved with him, which gave him a clue that it might belong to the only thing in the bathroom. Him. This was one step too far for his beleaguered brain, and he promptly refused to believe what he was seeing. It was an hallucination, simple as that, and he stepped across the room, pulled down his boxers, which was difficult thanks to the imaginary tail, slipped off his socks and stepped in. Unfortunately, the tail was still there, dripping on the floor after he had finished his shower, and he didn't have a choice but to investigate it. Unless someone had come in the middle of the night and grafted a fully functional bionic tail onto the base of his spine, it wasn't a joke either. He could feel it when he touched it. It twitched depending on what he was thinking about, and was very firmly attached to the rest of his body. Wrapped in a towel back in his bedroom, he did his very best not to freak out. About the only good thing he could see about the situation was that the shock had frightened his headache away. Charlie was a bright student with a promising future. All his teachers said so, and it didn't take a genius to come to a simple conclusion. This was all about the magic shop. He had been assaulted by a cat statue. He had a cat tattooed on his arm. He'd been dreaming about cats, and now he had a cat tail. That was as far as logical thought managed to take him before the freak-out he was trying to put off hit him. He had a tail, a 4-foot-long, brown, twitching tail, and it wasn't going away. This was not something he could cope with, not something he could be calmly rational about. This was not losing his wallet and not being able to get home from the pub. This was not being dumped by his girlfriend for being too nice. This was not even mistakenly thinking he had missed his A-level physics exam by 20 minutes. This was so much bigger than that. He began to shake, and an annoying voice at the back of his head asked him if maybe he was going bonkers. A more logical voice joined in chorus to point out he might just still be having a bad trip, but was just as unhelpful. This wasn't something he could deal with. "Mum?" he called, but his voice didn't seem to be working too well. What came out wasn't much more than a whisper. He was kind of afraid that someone else knowing would just confirm that he was losing his mind. His knees felt weak and he slumped towards the carpet, barely managing to cushion his fall with a hand on the bed. The last straw was when he looked over to his desk and saw the little pot his sister had brought back from honeymoon for him. It was doing the weird "there are two of me" thing, and his mind just screamed in anger and anxiety. That was when the icy calm welled up inside of him and smothered everything else he was feeling. It was like a blanket over all the emotions swirling around inside him, muting them and bringing back rational thought. Rational thought tinged with need. The only thing his mind seemed able to focus on was the desire for answers, and he knew without a doubt there was only one place to find them: the magic shop. Standing up, he dried his tail some more so that it wasn't too damp, before pulling out his loosest sweatpants. He didn't bother with boxers, just pulled on the soft trousers and tucked the tail down one leg. Following that, he finished dressing normally and left the house before he could bump into either of his parents. End of Chapter 1. To buy Cat's Call in ebook format, please visit whittakenpress.com.